We now have a practitioner's chat with our speakers, Shailendra Tiwari, founder and CEO, Fasal; Roli Jindal, co-founder and CEO, RMSI, Crop Analytics Private Limited; Taranjeet Singh, Bhamra, CEO and founder, AgNext Technologies. Sharing this session is Vijay, Bhaskaran, Lead Automation and Artificial Intelligence, EY India. With over 22 years of experience in consulting and business transformation, Vijay leads the Intelligent Automation and Artificial Intelligence AI for EY in India. He leads a team of multi-talented professionals focused on delivering intelligent automation across robotics, process automation, cognitive automation, including conversation, vision, and intelligence. Pleasure to have you all here with us this evening. Over to you, Vijay.
Thank you, Justin, for the introduction, and welcome all the panelists. I think we've got a great session ahead of us. My name is Vijay Shankar, and I'm your panel moderator for today. It's a very interesting topic that we have for applying AI in agriculture. But before I get into the discussion, let me just share some data points in the way that the sector is, as well as some of the challenges that we would see. Right? We all know agriculture is a $400 billion sector in India, contributing to about 17–18% of the GDP. More than 50% of our employable workforce is in agriculture. In India, is the second largest farm producer as well, be it in rice, wheat, pulse, or some of the other agri products. And if you really look at from another data point is, India has the second largest cultivatable land as well after the US. So clearly a big sector and big economy. I think something that is requiring AI to kind of drive more efficiency and productivity. But if you really look at a little bit more in deeper, right? What does that mean? 85% of the farmland is farm owners are own less than 3 acres, but that's the market. This is what we heard is that across different markets as well, these are small holding markets. I mean, this is how farmlands are being defined. The large farm holdings are pretty much an exception. If you really look at from a mechanization perspective or digitization perspective, less than 1% of farmers are holding even tractors, right? So there's still a long way to go from a mechanization perspective. But then, if you have to drive and adopt AI, then there's a lot more need for digitization. So what does that mean? And then if you really bring these two together and look at a couple of more data points around, right? One, our overall crop yield is 1/3 of some of our markets, whether you compare this with China or compare this with US, etc. And there is almost 30 to 40% losses during the crop yield itself. And then if you look at more from a downstream perspective, we see about 30 to 40% losses around spoilages. Again, another area to improve upon where the overall productivity of farmlands has increased, because both from a yield perspective as well as at a spoilage reduction perspective. And finally, if you really look at all of it putting together, how do you really improve farmers' income? I think India continues to be the laggards on that. When you really look at from a percentage perspective, when the end consumer, the price that they pay for, the farmers probably get about 10 to 25% of that price point. But if you really look at that from a more developed market perspective, it's almost 60 to 70%. So really a lot of things are different. And I think we've got a great panelist to kind of talk about how AI can really drive and address some of these problem statements. What I would now do is just bring all of the panelists into the conversation and just really talk about, where do you see the opportunity to adopt AI within the Indian market? What are some things that you are seeing and solutions that you are working on to drive this? So maybe I'll start with Roli, bring you into the conversation and hear your thoughts first.
Thank you, Vijay. As you heard, my name is Roli Jindal. I worked for the last 2.5 decades primarily in marketing and innovation across industry domains. And now I have founded with my colleagues an AI/ML based venture, which is focused on crop yield estimation and allied analytics products related to crop yield estimation. My company is called RMSI Cropalytics, which is an agri-tech company focused on crop data analytics, as it is pretty obvious. What we do is we analyze crop yields using AI/ML. And why do we do this? What is the need for it? Almost all agricultural activity in India is focused on increasing the farmer's income. We all know that low farmer incomes in India are typically a result of many structural anomalies, and most agri-tech firms are trying to address these structural anomalies. But the underlying fundamental question is, how do you measure the farmer's income? How do you measure the yield in a farm? And how do you do this across hundreds of millions of farms? And how do you do this accurately and timely and at high resolution? Because after all, you cannot physically measure and record the yield in every farm. So how do you do this? Historically, the government has done this, conducting a few physical sample measurements and then just averaging that and declaring that as the average yield across even an area as large as a district. And as you can well understand, this is neither accurate, nor does this show you pockets of distress in real time. And therefore, our solution is to use high resolution data from satellite imagery, which is available for a country of India's scale. And we apply artificial intelligence on that data to accurately predict crop yields for maybe the entire country, for maybe all the crops. So we do this with the government now. The government has a fairly active program trying to see the application of this technology. And we've done this for several seasons now across many, many districts. Back to you, Vijay.
Thanks, Roli. Thanks for that, from the area perspective. Shailendra, maybe I'll bring you in. And as you kind of see this as the next stage in terms of farmlands and, from the data that is needed from a farmland perspective, if you can just talk about what you are doing and what kind of solutions that you are building to solve this.
Thank you, Justin, for the introduction, and thank you, Vijay, for the question. I think the question that you put up is something which encompasses everything about agriculture. The moment you talk about low farmer income, or the moment you talk about low productivity, or the moment you talk about downstream losses, or you talk about digitization versus mechanization, and the need for both, I think in one way or another, we have the entire paradigm of agriculture, not just in India. I think definitely feel that AI has a role to play. We started Fasal in 2017 unofficially, where we were trying to learn ourselves, and then formally in 2018, and it has been about 3-4 years since we have been working directly with farmers as well, especially focused on pre-harvest, production side of this entire equation. And Roli was talking about understanding yield, and a fundamental question is, how do you measure the income of a farmer? What is the right income? What is low income and what is high income? So if you talk about farmers' incomes, you could talk about it from two perspectives. One is, how much is the farmer spending, and can you reduce that? And second, how much is the farmer making? And for the farmer to make more money, quality comes into picture, which I believe Taranjeet will speak in detail. But the majority of troubles that farmers are seeing at farm level, which deter this productivity, would include making farm level decisions right. So effectively, if you look at it, agriculture is nothing but day in, day out making certain decisions. And those decisions are made by the farmers, include decisions like irrigating crops, or fertigating those crops, or managing disease issues, or managing pest issues, or managing climate risk now, which is a thematic subject for this century per se. And the kind of decisions that a farmer makes decide the fate of the crop. So what kind of quality or quantity he will get. And then to make those decisions, he is executing. So how much money he's putting in execution, whether that money is optimum or not, whether he's doing it excess or he's doing it less or whatnot. And in our learning, the farmer does a lot in excess and then making money out of it. So as you know, and if you look at this entire value chain, there is a game of, you know, a lot of things can be done via AI, whether it is about making the right set of decisions at the farm while growing crops, whether it is optimizing the amount of money that the farmer is spending while growing the crops, whether it is getting certainty or transparency in saying that the quality that I feel is true quality in its true measurements. These are all, or whether it is about securing his crops. You know, we were talking about farm insurance, whether transparently we are able to protect his crop in a manner that he trusts that the system will work for him. These are all the areas where AI can play a massive role. I believe in the last 4 or 5 years, certain good organizations have set up shop and have proven that you can build technology which can solve some of these problems at scale. We have scratched a little bit of the surface, and I believe the potential is that in the next 5 to 10 years, 15 years, we'll be seeing these technologies scaling up and making massive impact on the entire value chain. That's my view on it, Vijay. Over to you.
Thanks, Shailendra. I think that's a very comprehensive view of how you see it and the areas that you well. So Taranjeet, maybe I think, you know, if you really look at, we've talked about satellite imaging from the data from a source standpoint, we've got data from the farmland perspective, maybe now coming to you from a quality standpoint. So what do you see, and what are the kind of solutions, problems that you are looking to solve for?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think, so the major thing that we want to address, you know, is, as Shailendra told, how can we bring decisions to the farmland in agriculture, not just in India, globally. You know, it's been time immemorial that, you know, the decisions mostly have been taken at a very, very distant locations. It has not been rendered to the point where it is needed because of, you know, lot of things, for which the prominent thing remains data, right? We didn't have technologies which could extract data on the spot, whether it's for the farm, whether it's for the post-harvest, whether it's pre-harvest, whether it's, you know, in entirety a more related to topography or, you know, climate or weather or anything like that. What has happened in the last 10 years especially, although these models existed, I mean, a decision support system existed 25 years, 30 years back as well. But the data streams that were collected was very, very difficult. And to build those models in an agriculture lab was the kind of thing that PhDs and others only used to think about. It was not something that was given to a farmer that, you know, that this is the data stream and this is the impact that will happen if you don't take this decision now. Now that is something I think most of the entrepreneurs in this world today, and a small set which is sitting here, kind of is focusing now. What we have all tried to focus on is how can we first get as much data as possible in order to build the AI which will replace the subjectivity that exists, as simple as that. All of us are trying to first remove the subjectivities that exist. And for that, our jaddojahad or the fight is to collect as much data streams as possible. and what are the technologies that will bring it, right? So, I mean, for me, honestly, I have been seeing agriculture for the last 25 years very closely. India, as a student, as a professional in India, as a professional globally, and then coming back as an entrepreneur. So in all 4 stages of my life, I have seen that the biggest issue is, data gathering or extraction, then cleaning the data, getting the data accuracy correct, and then building the model, and then kind of getting onto the predictive side, which removes the subjectivity. What I see, I mean, kudos to both Roli and Shailendra, who are doing this work on the pre-harvest, as well as on the more of the demographic, topographic analysis, weather and climate analysis, because that data is extremely large data sets that needs to be extracted, and models need to be built on. What we at AgNext found is that that anything that comes out of the farm, right, that's the output. So a lot of efforts have been put on the input side, on the growth side, but nothing on the post harvest, which is basically what is the output that is usually measured on two axes. One is quantity and one is quality. That the axis of quantity has been existing, but the axis of quality has not been there. Why output is important? Because again, not just the produce, but also the transaction that happens, any payment that happens in agriculture value chain. In the end, a farmer's salary is nothing but the payment that he gets, right? Or income is the payment that he gets for his produce. That is analyzed on 2 aspects, the quantity and the quality again. Now, if we can digitize quality, it can remove a hell lot of subjectivity that exists across the value chain. And you can talk about any commodity, you can talk about any point in the supply chain, you can talk about any country in the world. So if we can digitize coffee, we can go to Nicaragua and do that same thing and help them to get a better price. What we are doing in Rwanda. If we are doing tea in India, we can take it to Kenya, we can take it to Sri Lanka, and we can take it to Vietnam, and we'll still solve the same problem that exists now in India. If you're talking pulses, we can still go to Kazakhstan and we can go to pulses, in Vietnam and kind of get the same problem solved. The idea is, how do you digitize it, and what is the technology available which will remove the subjectivity of quality assessment or the output assessment. If somebody wants to have a more easier understanding of it, it is the output assessment of a crop, which signifies a payment or which signifies the income of a farmer. So what we are building at AgNext is, wherever there is a transaction happening, wherever there is a buyer and a seller intersection in the value chain, how can we bring our technology so that everybody gains out of it? The buyer gains from a better input and the seller gains a better price. To build this, we collected more than 2 million food samples data to build the algorithm that are needed to get to an accuracy that is acceptable to go into the market. We didn't even go to the market till we were sure that it is commercially acceptable, that what a person or what a lab will analyze, we will analyze it in less than 1/10 the time at at least a 2x accuracy than what these guys are delivering. So that's what is the fight of data. And I think, but that stage is gone in 2021 because I think 2011 to 2016, I can say, was a stage where everyone was understanding ki kaun sa data leke aana hai, which I think now all of us have understood. 2016 to 21, the fight between all the entrepreneurs in agri-tech in the world was ki ab ye data ka karna kya hai. Yeah. Right now, as a community, if I may be allowed, I can say that we have solved in 5-year plans, we have solved these 2 big problems. Now we know how to extract data. We are experts of our chain or experts of our game. Shailendra is an expert of his game. Roli is an expert of her game. We know how to extract. We know what is the insight. The 2021 to 2031, the next 10 years is going to be an amazing journey of AI, right? This is where the AI applications will come in, which will talk about, how can I, enable a warehouse more profitable? How can I remove any kind of, subjectivity that leads to a lot of malpractices in a logistics? I'll give you, we work with a large client with just analyzing the output or the quality of a particular thing. We could save a massive amount in crores by just digitizing that. So I'm talking about, and in warehousing, you can save a lot if you have the right quality stored. It's because of the inferior quality that India is getting 30% lost in the warehouses. So food safety concerns, the sustainability of agriculture, where the farmers gets the right incentive, right pricing is the right incentive for a farmer. Generation upon generation, if you go with the best quality and again you get the same price, it's akin to saying that, whether you are the last or first of the batch, you will get a job in McKinsey or you will not get a job, right? I'm just talking about that. It's akin to that. So how can you bring a parity on quality is what is AI solving through AgNext. And I think as the food moves from the harvest to every node of the supply chain, our technology will be there. So I think we are really thankful to AI for, kind of enabling such decision support systems, which can replace the subjectivity that is the need of agriculture for the next 10 years. And I think that's where we see AI coming in a big way.
Super. No, thanks, Taranjeet. I think that's very well articulated in terms of the various areas. I think you bring in a very interesting point, right? Now, over the last 5 years, you've got the data, and the data is made available. Now, what you do with the data is what you're looking at. But there are 2-3 things that are still yet to be, or maybe get some perspectives from you as well. Is, with data there comes trust, right? How do you trust the data that's coming behind it, right? I mean, how do you get the ecosystem to trust? There are different players within the ecosystem who needs to all vouch for the data, because they're making that decisions based on the data, whether it's the yield data, whether it is the weather data, or whether any of those elements around it, right? So if you don't have the trust, and that trust does not, the farmers don't see the same level of data trust, they're not going to be using that solutions as well. So really, maybe I'll bring you into this conversation. What are you doing, and how do you think that, both from a data stream perspective and building trust within the ecosystem, that you think is important as we kind of scale AI across agri-tech?
So it's a famous Spider-Man quote, right? With great data comes greater responsibility. So that's what we are talking about. That if you are going to the farmer, or if you're going to a trade happening of millions of dollars or millions of tons, you cannot afford to be wrong. So that's the whole thing, that any business model that is working on building AI centric models, for them data collection, data generation, data classification, data cleansing, that entire data ops is so important as a team. So for example, our 70 to 80% of the spend of our company is on data ops. It is not at all on the hardware. It is not at all on the, I would say AI modeling with AI scientists sitting and building it. It is 70% of our cost of generating a model is data ops. Because if your input is not right, you can never trust your output. So for example, if we build something in milk, or we build something in tea, we spend more than 3 seasons to collect data. So it's not a game for the faint-hearted who are doing the data game, because you just can't go and say that, hey, you know what, we are a AI. I mean, it's not a PPT game that you can go and say we are a AI blockchain company, right? So it's like, you are talking about the game. You know what you are talking about. I mean, you know how to collect 2.2 million samples of food, to send it to labs, to cleanse it, to ensure that they are correct. They are part of the season, they are part of the geography, they are part of the variety that you are trying to analyze. So that is a humongous task. So what you rightly said, it's with great, what did you say? That with great data comes great responsibility. I think that is what we are talking about, that whosoever is building an AI-centric model.
Really, what's your point of view from a data perspective?
I think Taranjeet's been very comprehensive in this. I agree with most of what he's saying. There is all over the world in the AI industry, there are certain, when you adopt AI into a specific sector or into a particular application, there are some principles that you need to follow. Principles like human intervention, constant checking, verification, validation of models, recalibration, ground truthing in our case, for example. So for example, if I've said that this place has so much yield, I would go and check in 1,000 farms. I would physically measure the yield and see how well it's tallying with my model.
Yeah.
And, I need to deliver at 90% plus accuracy. And I need to do that season after season, crop after crop. So I need to keep doing that validation. So whenever AI is brought into any application, there are certain, and this is very well known across, the practitioners of AI, that these principles have to be followed. So this is not something new that we would be doing in agriculture. I mean, in any industry, when AI is applied, you have to keep revalidating, rechecking, recalibrating, bringing in the human checks, the human interventions. So that has to keep happening here like any other sector till the applications mature. But fact of the matter is that it will remove subjectivity. As we heard, before in the discussion, you need to remove subjectivity because there is a lot of vested interest at every step in the value chain. So the only way to build trust in the system is to remove subjectivity, is to make the technology application transparent, is to make the outputs transparent, is to I'm kind of taking off a little bit from where Taranjeet was talking. Now you have mobile phones with near infrared cameras, for example. I'm digressing a little bit, but this is interesting because we've just, come out of the mango season. When you have mangoes in the peak mango season, 1 time out of 5, you will not be happy with the flavor of the mango. You paid the same amount of money. It's an expensive fruit. You want to be sure, even as a consumer, I'm not even talking about large companies that buy enormous quantities. Even as a consumer, I want to be sure that the mango that I'm buying is going to have good flavor. Now imagine if I had a mobile phone with an app where I could take a picture of a mango and it would tell me whether the flavor is good or bad. It's going to happen one day. It's maybe not happening today, but it's going to happen one day, right? What have you done? You've cut out the subjectivity. And you've brought in transparency. You've digitized the quality. That's what Taranjeet is talking about, really. This is the way to build trust into the system. Today, your fruit seller is saying, "Acha hai, madam, le jao, le jao." This is the way to build trust into the system with data, with AI.
Thanks, Roli. Maybe one more point just to get everybody together. I think you already see a lot of need for the ecosystem to come together, right? Whether it's government, private companies, startups, and also invest around making sure that data streams are used and validated as well. Maybe a quick 1-minute round just around everybody in terms of how do you see the ecosystem coming together in developing AI in agriculture, and what would you like to see more of that in the next 5 years? I'll start with Shailendra.
Sure, Vijay. So I think first I would like to borrow what Taranjeet said. I think he has just put it so beautifully and succinctly that the entire task is to remove subjectivity, and agriculture probably is the most subjective sector that I can think of at this moment. I think the magic throughout this value chain, like whether it is a farmer deciding which seed I'm going to put, or which agrochemical I'm going to use, or the kind of decisions that he's making at the farm level, or the way his produce is seen by him, or whether the way his produce is seen by, evaluated by the buyer, or the way it is moving across the value chain and reaching the plate. I think this entire value chain is very, very subjective in nature. And the challenge is that these are all difficult pieces and pivotal pieces. So if you are wrong in choosing the right seed, that means you will have a ripple effect in the entire value chain. So you'll have lower productivity, you'll have lower quality, you'll have lower income. So these all points, touch points, are very, very sensitive. And because these all points are subjective in nature, I think what Taranjeet was mentioning, with great data comes great responsibility. I think this is also very well put out. That every piece is so hard to sort of solve that you will still not see one company which is building technology for this entire value chain. When Taranjeet says that it took 5 years to reach from a stage and it took 2 million samples, I can definitely relate to him. And any AI practitioner will be able to relate to him who is actually building an AI model in terms of how difficult it is. It took us 2.5, 3 years to build certain models for our first crop. It became simpler after that, but the entire thing about responsibility is that you are not just securing trust of other people, but you are securing your own trust on your system. Whether you trust your system to go to somebody like Cargill or not, or more than that, whether you trust your system to go to a farmer or not, whose entire livelihood probably will pivot around what you tell him. And this brings into the aspect about interoperability, that I don't think in the next 5-6 years we will have one company which would have built technology throughout the value chain, that you are able to help in supporting decisions, pre-production, post-production, throughout the supply chain. And that's where everybody has to realize that sharing data or making this ecosystem behave in a certain way is beneficial to everyone, the stakeholders, the organizations, the governments, the farmers, because the problem is so complicated that one person will not be able to solve it. That is why you are seeing me building pre-harvest, you are seeing Roli solve some part of this equation, you are seeing Taranjeet solve some part of this equation, and between the three of us, we all know what it takes to do something like this. So my view is that it is a hard problem to solve. Somebody will have to pick one problem and work on it. It is not a sector where you will just be able to go and do whatever you can. But if you actually join hands and create an ecosystem where data sharing is efficient, is useful, is beneficial, and is safe, I think a lot can be achieved in a smaller time frame. That's what can happen. And for the sake of that, I think the ecosystem should be built in a way that we are able to interoperate with each other as well, from the data point of view.
No, very well said, Shailendra. I think it's like you mentioned, it's a hard problem to solve. I think everyone needs to come together, build that data ecosystem. Therefore, then model solutions can be built, for a greater good, right? I mean, otherwise it just becomes standalone point problems that are being solved, but you're not able to really connect all of them together. We are running quite late into our session, but Taranjeet, maybe just one quick closing comment from you in terms of what do you see from an AI adoption standpoint, and then we will quickly summarize.
I think adoption, there is no other option. Adoption has to happen. And it's just about perseverance of the right technology and not the right marketing. I think people will have to build something that replaces, and adoption will happen of AI in agriculture. For I think the biggest thing that will be adopted will be subjectivity removal. So whether it is on the farm side, pre-harvest, post-harvest, people would want to bring in technologies that can change subjectivity, or altogether, bolster subjectivity with more data, and bring in eons of experience that lies at the heartlands with more data points. So I don't have even have a slight doubt that this won't fly. AI will transform agriculture. It's just about the right tech, the right application, and the right effort. Otherwise, there is no nothing stops. I mean, putting blame on agriculture that it's a slow adoption game, I do not believe that. It's a high adoption game. It's a slow modeling game. It takes time because of one thing, that for the right tech you have to build the right data models. So I think that is the only thing that is stopping. Otherwise, once it's done, there is no stopping.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sanjay. It's great words. I took a lot away from the session. Just at least 2-3 points that came to my mind. I think, how do you really, remove subjectivity in the entire stream? Use decisions or data-driven decisions across all aspects of it. I think AI has a big role to play around it. I think too, on the ecosystem coming together, building more trusted data that all parties within the ecosystem can share, build on, and create. I think it's a great value proposition, because I think it's like Shailendra had mentioned, it's a hard problem to solve. I think people need to come together to bring in, and all three of you are building great solutions, great products, great problems that you're solving for. And I think I'm sure there's a lot more that you are all bringing to the table in the future to come. I think we are in that cusp of getting into AI revolution. So I hope the next 5 years, is driving that transformative change in agriculture, bringing AI together. And I thank you all for joining in today and sharing your insights and thoughts, and wishing you all the very best in all the areas that you're working on. Thank you, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed, Vijay, for aptly summing up that amazing session. And thank you to our panelists, Shailendra, Roli, and Taranjeet. And of course, Vijay, thank you for moderating that interactive session.